Hello, how are you, beautiful?
I'm good. How are you, darling?
I'm good. I'm so glad we got technology on our side tonight. This is exciting.
We do, finally. It's good.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I just thought for tonight's chat, I thought that both of us could share a little bit about our integration of mind, body, and soul, and how both of us have got to this really unique place of integrating all three. But for so long, we've been kind of in this limbo place where we've been only doing one or doing two of them, and just kind of struggling to get that wholeness in terms of our health. So first of all, I want to welcome you. Maybe you can just tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do, and then we will dive into our conversation. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect. I'm Ashley Grant. I own Soul Purpose Reiki, and I am, you can't see it very well here, but I'm currently in my cozy little bunkie right now where I do my treatments. Reiki is a combination of releasing negative energy and also bringing positive energy into the body for healing, relaxation, very much a spiritual, mental, emotional part of health. And depending on kind of where you sit and where your path is, it definitely kind of segues into different parts. So, yeah.
Very cool. And how did you get to a place where you decided that you wanted to do Reiki? For those that may not know, Ashley used to be a teacher and had some interesting life events that happened after having children. So maybe you want to share a little bit about that, Ashley.
Sure. So when I talk about health, Ange kind of mentioned this, but I talk about 4 pillars. So the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and emotional. And those 4, when one is falling apart, it makes it more difficult for the other 3 to kind of keep everything upright. So that's just kind of the preface. But so following the birth of my first child, Felix, I was in a complete state of postpartum anxiety, OCD, and I didn't know it. I was just barely surviving. So my mental and my emotional state was just blown out of the water. It was awful. And I didn't realize it, but looking back, whoa. And so that led me down the path to Reiki. I found Reiki kind of through a friend and took my first course, and it changed my life. It brought me back into balance. It brought me back into who I am. And so that was my first kind of like, whoa, it's not just about the physical. It's not just about the emotional. It's not just about one of those things. One of those things can really be falling apart, and the rest goes to hell, basically. So for me, what was falling apart was that mental, emotional piece, and Reiki pulled that back in, made that pillar strong again so that I could function, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the beginning of your transformation journey, you would say. And would you say that that tackled all 4 of the pillars of health for you, or that it was just focused on a couple?
It didn't tackle all of the 4 pillars. It was definitely, that was the one that I wasn't coping. I wasn't functioning properly. And so by healing that side of it, I was able to kind of boost up those other pillars, recognize when things were falling apart, So Reiki definitely targets all of them, but more that mental, emotional, spiritual side. And for me, it was just the mental, emotional at that point. But I would say along this journey, I ignored actually the physical. That was one pillar that I really neglected. I thought, I'm doing Reiki, I'm really grounding, I'm really spiritual, I'm, meditating. Kids are, everything's good, right? My anxiety is lowered, the OCD piece is under control, and that all happened with Reiki. But my interaction with you, it actually happened when we were away on a trip, and I explained to you kind of what was going on in my body, and that was chronic yeast infections, right? So that was my body's way of saying, girl, what you're doing with your body isn't working. And I struggled with that for close to half a year maybe. And then that's when you helped me make that shift with diet by changing that. And that was the first time I really started to go, ooh, my physical really is, as important as that mental, emotional, spiritual side.
Mm-hmm. So where were you a year ago? Obviously, you had the yeast infections, but where were you physically versus where you are right now, Ashley?
So I was literally 1 year ago today, I was 35 pounds heavier than I am right now. I was, like you said, having chronic yeast infections, and lethargy was just a part of my life. When I look at just that physical element, that was kind of, those three were really big. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so
no,
you're going to
continue with what you're going to say.
No, I was just going to say, and now 1 whole year later, making that shift with just changing what goes into my body, paying attention to it. I don't, well, Ange, but not everybody knows. I haven't changed every single thing. I haven't thrown out carbs. I haven't thrown out wine. I don't eat a separate meal because my kids need to eat something else. I have integrated it in a way that makes sense. And partway through that journey, I started to notice the changes in my body. The weight loss was just kind of an added bonus. It was great, but the changes in my body, the clarity in my brain, the way that I woke up and felt was different. And so by just changing part of that physical, I started to see it kind of permeating into those other areas, going, I feel more mentally clear. I feel more emotionally calm, right? So I decided to add in that exercise piece and move my body, really move that energy around, and felt even better, even stronger. Really adding that made a difference too, right? So it started with just my body going, this is working and I'm going to show you how. And then, connecting with you and saying, okay, let's, with a change in diet and adding an exercise, within 1 year, I'm more me, I guess is the best way to say it.
So what do you think happens for people when they only try to tackle one pillar or one component, or when they try to change everything all at once, and they're like, I'm going to do Reiki, and then I'm going to have an exercise plan, and then I'm going to have a diet plan, and they're going to also do journaling every day? What happens in both of those circumstances?
So I think if we, as a whole, only focus on one thing, you'll end up in the same place that I did, where if we ignore those other pillars, they're going to start to crumble. And then you'll be in a state where you have to focus solely on that one pillar to heal it, to help it. So for me, I was very much in that mental, emotional, it was okay, it was good, but I was really ignoring that physical piece. And so by letting that crumble, I had to kind of whoa and come back, really focus on the physical. So if we want to be in balance, we can't just focus on kind of that 1 or 2 or 3 pieces. It's all of it. I do think, though, if we if we focus on only that one for too long, the other three are going to suffer too, right? So it's a bit of a balance, but it doesn't mean starting everything all at once, because then you'll just throw it all to hell and you'll go back to old habits.
And be overwhelmed and totally just feel like it's almost like we set ourselves up a little bit for failure in that regard. And I think that's what happens in January. Like, let's be real, people are like, new year, new start, new me, let's go. I want to do a new program. I want to do this. I'm leaving all those habits in the past. And then like two or three weeks down the line, which is kind of where we are right now, it's kind of like, oh man, I can't keep up with this. And then all of those old habits, all those old thought patterns start creeping up again.
Yeah.
Right. Now, how do you think somebody can determine which pillar they should be attacking first, or where they should be putting their energy first? Do you think that's directly related with where the biggest pain is, where the biggest symptom is, where the biggest like daily struggle is? Or how do we determine this is my first course of action?
So that's a really good question. I actually have a meditation coming up that will do that. Basically, we get into a relaxed state and you bring your pillars up visually, and you start to look at them, right? You really start to hone in on that. So that's one way that, you know, if we can calmly get ourselves in that quiet space, our intuition will tell us. If you're not sure, pick one, right? Pick one. So if for me, what happened was I didn't do an exercise program, change my diet, drink 1 million gallons of water every single day all at once, right? It started with, you can't eat bread for 1 whole month, girl. I can do that, right? So then that month passed and it was like, okay. And it gradually moved in. So it's with those pillars, if you don't know where to begin, start with where it's easy, right? So you might be, you know what, I do rock the physical part. I am good at that. I'm really, really strong at that, but I should drink more water. Drink more water. And when that becomes easy, move to the next one. Oh, I've been really hard on my kids lately. Man, why is that? Oh, it's because I don't feel connected. I don't feel like I'm doing my best thing. I'm not bringing my best self home. Okay, what does that need to look like for me to kind of manage that, right? So it starts really small, and it truly doesn't matter which one you begin with. Some of us will have that like blazing one where it's like, oh, yeah, definitely that one. Definitely that one, right? And others will be like, well, I just don't know. So it doesn't matter. If you have that blazing one and it's staring you in the face and you're like, I know it's this one, start there. If you don't, start anywhere. Just start.
For sure. Thanks for sharing, girl. I feel like too, I want to dive a little bit into a little bit of my story and my integration with you, which I find really, really interesting as well. So there may be some people that are watching this that aren't familiar with me, that are from your audience. So just take a little bit to introduce myself. But me and Ashley actually went to high school together and have so much in common. It's kind of ridiculous that we haven't like intersected to be friends in the way that we are right now until like, I don't know how long we've been like close friends, but let's say like 8 years or something like that, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting because we have so many things in common, and we see the world so much the same in a lot of respects. And it's interesting that we're here and now working the way that we are with one another. But my background in terms of how I got to where I am right now is really been in the physical space, has really been in the nutrition space. And a lot of my background has been in transforming people's bodies and my own body from whatever state it's in into whatever sort of physique and physical transformation they're hoping to manifest or hoping to create. And so much of that has felt very calculated, not only for myself, but also the people that I've worked with. Now, it's interesting where I'm at right now, which is like physically a place where I never really thought I would feel totally comfortable in my skin, just because I went through such a big weight loss journey for myself. I was very lean for stage competitions, and even at very low body fat, I never felt like it was enough. It was always like chasing the next accolade, chasing the next achievement. And what happens with that part is there's really no true self-love that ends up coming from that place, because it's never really good enough. It doesn't really matter what body fat percentage you're at or like what the body's physically looking like. I still didn't feel like I was enough. Didn't matter like how successful my business was. Doesn't matter like what my body was looking like. What I really found for myself was like, physically, that's all that I was focused on. That was the only pillar that mattered. That was like my whole everything. And I could really shut out everything else, like block out all the emotions, block out all the spirituality, block out all of that piece, because I was so focused on the other, like that other piece of it, which was really physical. Now, what's happened, I would say, like through COVID and the birth of my last son, is I've really been called to tackle this emotional, mental, spiritual piece of me that I've been running away from for 30 freaking years. Where it was like, spirituality, don't need that. Emotional shit, I don't need that. And the very weird part about it is I actually believe it's been connected with not having a menstrual cycle. So that was the initial part. Like, all of a sudden last year, literally at the exactly same part where I called out Ashley in relation to her like candida and business stuff, was like, I got my period for the first time, and I'm like, holy shit, like what the hell's going on? Like, up until that point, it really had been random periods, not consistent, nothing that made any sense. And then I hanged out with you a year ago, and then all of a sudden I'm like, shit, I got my period. And so the funny part about that is, since that, it's like now I'm having what should be regular emotions come forward, regular baggage from frickin' 32 something years. That's like, okay, girl, you gotta deal with it. And like also being out of the gym environment and working out, but at a very different capacity than what I'm used to. Bodybuilding shows like literally barely happened last year, and all of that like physical piece has just dissipated. So the world essentially forced me, okay, girl, you got to deal with your baggage. And that's where I called you and was like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. But like it manifested as like panic attacks and like crying like uncontrollably, and like being in very normal settings and needing to cry in the bathroom, and like one wrong sentence like putting me into a tailspin, right? So it was me not identifying those pillars that I really needed to address. And so I, on the reverse side of that, instead of having to focus on the physical piece, have now been called to integrate with you in terms of tackling the emotional pillar, tackling the spiritual pillar, and being like, okay, yeah, we're ready to do this. And that's what I think is so beautiful, A, about our friendship, but B, also about our business integrations. It's kind of like you got some pillars that you can really tackle, and I have some pillars that I can really tackle, and then together our integration is kind of cool, right? So I think it's so funny how that's all played out. Now, I did want to tackle the piece for you that is really interesting, and that is really where people carry weight on their bodies, and how that really is an indicator of what may be going on with those emotional blockages or chakra blockages. So why don't we dive into the different areas of the body, and then if somebody's listening is like, oh my goodness, that is where I hold my weight, going to totally make sense. And you can certainly use me as an example too, right?
For sure.
Of where I hold it. So.
And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Ange, because the 4 pillars they're separate, but they're integral. So for you, it showed up as menstrual, right? And that gave you that clue to, whoa, okay, this is emotional. This is connected over here. So there is really, they're not completely separate. They lean on one another. They pick up the slack for each other, compensate here and there. And so when it comes to the body, right, we think very physical. That's very much, you know, diet, nutrition, exercise, that all makes sense. To take care of my body, I must nourish it. I need to move it. That makes sense. But we don't always think of the way that emotions store in the body. And that's what Reiki really dives into. And so when it comes to weight gain, that very physical piece of like very visible, we don't think that there's an emotional connection per se.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, because Reiki is all about energy, and we are all energy. Everything is energy. That's physics. Food, we know, converts to energy within our body. So we eat food and we go, oh yeah, I can, you know, my brain is a little bit clearer. I can go about my day. And so when we eat that food, when it converts to energy, that food nourishes our body, but it goes places, right? So that energy, when there's excess energy, where does it go? It goes to our most vulnerable places, and that turns into weight gain. So that's why I can eat the exact same thing as you. I can do the exact same exercises as you, but it shows up differently on my body because I carry my energy. I carry stresses in different areas. So when I gain weight, I very much gain in the tummy. And that is anxiety, sexuality, and a little bit of grounding, but mostly it's that anxiety piece. That belly fat is anxiety. And when it comes to grounding, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but Ange, when you gain weight, where do you gain it?
From the waist downwards, for sure.
Sorry, you cut it there, love. Could you say that again?
Waist downwards, thighs, bum, like, and then it's funny because even when I'm like lean-ish, that will be always, that will, like, everything will just stay there, right? My stomach will be totally flat, and then from the waist downwards, it will be like still voluptuous, still quite a bit that's still holding on there.
Right. And so I couldn't hear all of that, but I also know your answer. So booty, waist, hips, that kind of trunk area. And that is grounding. So needing to feel safe, needing to feel secure, needing to feel like where you are is where you belong. Mm-hmm. And so when we have these areas that if we're not grounded, if we have anxiety, if those chakras or those areas are closed, our food energy goes, that's where we need this energy. That's where we need this energy. I got to send it there, right? And it turns into fat and protection and healing. That's what your body's trying to do. We look at it and go, well, this is irritating. But there's a message to it, right? People with big boobs.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, what about the chest and people that hold it up here, which I've seen quite a bit of too.
Yeah. And so that's exactly it. So when we all look at those girls and go, oh, they got big boobs and everything's tiny. But I go, oh, what's going on with that heart? Is it childhood? Is it current? Right? And that's that self-love piece, as well as giving love and receiving love, right? And when that's out of balance, yeah, it goes right to the chest.
Mm-hmm. So would you say then that in your experience, it doesn't matter if that is unresolved, it will still show up there? Yep, no problem. Would you say that if that's unresolved, it still shows up there? Because kind of like what I was saying for you, my lower body, booty, waist stuff, the only time that goes away is if I'm like 10% body fat or less, which is like ridiculous. Yeah. That is absolutely ridiculous that my body holds on to like even that like very last way in that way. And it would be interesting now as I'm like just kind of talking out loud about this, like what that may look like in the future now that we're working on a lot of the like resolving of that stuff and what that buildup is looking like, right? So from your experience, have you seen that? Do you feel like that's something that needs to be tackled?
From a client perspective or from
both from a client from a client's perspective, but also for the person that's listening and they're thinking to themselves like, oh man, this is why that's so stubborn for me.
Yeah. And many of us will say, well, it's genetics. Like my mom gains in her belly, so I gain in my belly. But it's that anxiety is also generational. That lack of grounding is something we get from our environment as well as, you know, our genetics. Our environment, that nature nurture debate that's energy you pick up from your mom and carry with you, right? So I would say it's very much, I see it with clients here all the time. I can tell just by looking and a few other clues and obviously the energy, but it's like, okay, I know where you're, right? Like when we think of where do you carry the weight, emotional weight shows up as physical weight. That's the physical manifestation of that inside your body. Mm-hmm. The other clue that people often also give is where do your hands go? So when you're laying on my table, where do your hands go?
To my sides normally, I think.
Because you're open.
Because what?
Because you're open.
Okay.
And so when people feel, when they walk in here and feel vulnerable, their hands go somewhere. And our hands,
belly, like their belly, their chest.
Belly, chest, throat, root chakra, and sometimes it's hands down and open. And we see that in regular life. When people, wherever people put their hands, that's where they're seeking healing. That's where they're seeking protection. Because, and Reiki is a hands-on healing. That's what we all are meant to do. When your son trips and he hurts himself, you wrap as much of your body around him as you possibly can to help him, to heal him, to make him feel better. When a friend is sad, you hug them. When you want to be, you know, as close as possible with your partner, like it doesn't get more hands-on touchy than that, right? So healing, hands-on healing is human. And so when we put our own hands on our own body, it's because we want to heal in that area. So that, along with where do people carry their weight, is right when they walk in the door. Those are the first two things before I even tune into their energy that give me a heads up on where you're at.
Why do people cross their arms when they're in front of you?
Why do they, or why
do they? Like, why when people stand like this? Do you know when they're just like, is that their heart being closed off, or what is that indicating?
It is to protect the heart. And that's why, depending on, in teachers college, we were always told, you know, put your hands down when the kids are coming into the classroom, even if it's uncomfortable, because, you know, hands across your chest is very standoffish. And we just do it naturally, but it is just a natural inclination to protect your heart or to kind of stay removed from that heart place when somebody is with you. Like when I think of sitting around with my best friends on the couch, when I'm sitting with you and Sharina, I don't cross my arms.
No, I just want to touch you guys.
Exactly. But
and rub your legs. Yeah.
That's right. You want to heal through touch. You don't want to sit there with your arms closed off on the separate chair. You want to be on that couch with your hands on their knees, arms around their shoulders, holding their hand, whatever that is. But it takes a very open and vulnerable place to be in that when you don't naturally feel safe.
And why do you think then, you know how they always say like, oh, you're so touchy-feely, you're always touching and feeling. Why is there this fear surrounding that, like, touchy-feeliness? I guess I would say mostly in like close relationships. It can be in like friendships or with your partner, where when you're really like touching them in any way, whether it's public or not, there's like this little bit of like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people just hold that. So what is that reaction? Is that fear? Is that like them not being open? What is it?
It's vulnerability. So as soon as you touch somebody who is closed and scared or you don't know them, all of a sudden you're in their energy. You're physically able to tune into them, right? So when you hug me, I'm vulnerable. And so that's why if you were to just go up to a stranger at the grocery store, well, especially during COVID, it would be extremely inappropriate unless there was a communication beforehand. Hey, I noticed you look really sad. Would I be able to give you a hug? You're asking to tune into that vulnerability and be there for it, right? And with touch as healing, you're asking, can I heal you? Can I help you? Right? And it's the same with our kids and our significant others and our best friends. It's natural, it's innate, because we naturally want to feel that. They're naturally open in our energy, right? So as soon as you have somebody who's pretty, I'm not a hugger. What are you afraid of me seeing? What are you afraid of releasing? What are you afraid of showing the world?
See, and I always find it, I wouldn't say it's like natural with strangers, but I would say that like, I don't know. I'm just thinking to myself, because I'm very huggy, I'm very holdy, very touchy,
very affectionate. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking to myself, what does that reveal about me? Obviously, I'm not a Reiki practitioner, but like I give back rubs every time I hug, but don't really like think about like, I guess I've never really thought about that being healing, or never really thought about like that piece. I just wonder, what does that reveal about me as a person to being that open in terms of giving that kind of.
For sure. And so it is double-edged. So think of when you work with a client and they reach their goals. Do you get a charge from that? Yes. Right? When you touch somebody, you're also getting healing from that.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
So it's not just about that person.
Yeah.
So that person in the grocery store who's upset and you hug them, you ask for permission, blah, blah, blah. You walk away going, I feel good. I felt good to do that. Right? So it can also be you needing healing too, seeking it out.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Right? Does that make sense? So you're drawing on that healing for you as well. And simply by touching me, do you feel better? Or is this couch and you have your hand on my knee, does it feel good to you?
Yeah.
Right? That's a healing to you as well as to me, but you're seeking that comfort for yourself as well.
Interesting. Do you feel like it's so interesting to be talking in this climate, because obviously COVID makes us like so separated and like no touching, like separating masks, 6 feet, all this crap. Do you not fear a little bit from a healing perspective what not touching one another and being so separated long term? We can't see the ones we love, we can't touch the ones we love. We're supposed to see it through screens, and as much as it's great to see your face, what is your biggest fear associated with that lack of touch or lack of interaction with those that we love, and then those that we may also be able to have that kind of impact on.
So to me, touch and emotion are the human element. When you take away the human element, which is touch, which is emotion, which is connection, our whole world is missing, to me, that all of those pillars are affected.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you think of that touch piece. When we can't touch other people, we start to turn inwards versus being vulnerable and exposed. When we are limited to our own household, that changes. It will change. If this is long term, it will change the way that we interact with one another. There is so much fear connected to touching, mm-hmm. that it is, in my very humble opinion, very, very scary. And then on top of that, we cover up half of the face. So now you can't tell if I'm smiling. You can't tell if I'm upset with you. You can't tell anything, except maybe if I really exaggerate, my eyes light up.
But a lot of people don't communicate with their eyes. Have you not noticed that? Like, I have. Like, I feel like me and you are rather expressive, and I feel like it's a little bit more, even because we influx our voices. But what I've really noticed in terms of eye language and influx of language, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's kind of scary. A, for our kids, but B, also like, you almost need to make it more exaggerate. Like, you need to exaggerate it more. And because everybody's so mopey, it's almost less, right? Like, it's almost like a little scary.
For sure. And so prior to Christmas, I was picking my son up from school, and we're all, the parents are all 6 feet apart, like we're supposed to be. We're all standing outside. Some parents have masks on, some don't. But nobody's talking, because all of a sudden you're far enough away from that I don't really have to talk to you. We can stand here and ignore each other. I also have this thing over my face that makes it almost like a little barricade of like, I don't really have to interact with you because you're standing, 2 feet from me and I'm not wearing this face covering. Now you're pretty far away. You can't read my lips. I'm shouting, right? Like all of a sudden. And I noticed this, like, oh my gosh, there's 30 adults here. All of our kids are at this school, and every single person was staring at the brick wall of the school. And I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? Not a single conversation, not a single interaction for probably 5 minutes. And people just keep showing up. They join the line, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what we're going to create. And to me, maybe this is not politically correct, we are going to have an autistic society that don't know how to touch, that don't know how to read or express emotions. All of that will be taught through online courses, right? And so when somebody's happy, they'll be smiling, what it looks like, versus actually interacting with somebody who is smiling, and the little nuances that kind of come with that. So I see it definitely impacting us, but also our children, because this will become their norm. And it's not innate, and it's not normal to not touch even our grandparents, our siblings, right? If you can't hug your aunt and uncle, you definitely can't hug your friend. And you can't, right? So it creates this major fear. And I don't think the long-term impact of that is really being analyzed.
No.
I need to keep your physical self healthy right now. Well, okay, so there's a physical self here, and sure, I want to remain healthy, but there is an emotional, there is a spiritual, there is a mental capacity that we're just ignoring completely with all of this COVID, sanitizing, masks, social distancing, lockdown. And whether you believe COVID and all of that is good or not, we are ignoring the fallout of those other three pillars that are essentially crumbling. I can see it crumbling in the mental health of people, clients, my own family, right? Like your own family, your own friends, you see them under so much different pressure because of those three pillars being ignored.
Totally, totally. So if there's somebody who's listening right now and thinking to themselves, whew, that's me. I'm crumbling. I'm like hot mess express and I need help in some capacity. Let's lead into some action steps that they could take for, I can tackle the physical piece, but why don't you tackle the like pieces that somebody could tackle right now in terms of their spiritual and emotional health?
So a lot of it comes down to feeling connected, right? And so when we touch somebody, when we talk to somebody, when somebody sees our emotions, there's a connection, right? So we have to work really hard to establish those connections, even though it's difficult. So for some people, it is connecting through social media. That's great. I don't think it's quite the same connection, right? That human connection is not the same through media, but if it helps you, do it. The other thing is when you're at the grocery store, this is so simple. So when I go, he's not in school right now, but when Felix does go to school, I talk up everybody around me. I'm like, I am going to make us all connect. I'm going to do this, right? And I leave there feeling better because I have made a connection with somebody about nothing, really, essentially, but we both got to connect, right? So it's finding the little things throughout the day that make you feel connected. When you're sitting on a couch, bring your kids onto your lap, snuggle in with them, right? When it comes to walking outside and the only person you can touch is your partner, touch them, hold their hand, make that extra effort, because right now it's easy to not.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're crumbling, when you feel like you're falling apart, okay, what do I need to connect right now? I need to call a friend. I need to start a conversation. I need to text somebody, whatever it is, but getting either emotional connection or work, right? Those are three ways that as humans we connect, is through talking, through conversation, through touch, and through emotional expression. So finding little ways throughout your day to bring that in.
I love that so much, girl. Thank you.
Yeah.
And from my side of things, I think there's a few things. I think right now, obviously, people are forcing themselves, gyms are closed, they're forcing themselves to do home workouts. If home workouts are your jam, rock it, baby. But if they're not, get outside and just enjoy nature, move your body, dance with your kids, find a way to move your body that really brings you joy. Don't feel as though, okay, I have to crush a personal best and I have to be in my home gym for an hour. If that is your jam, do it. Don't feel like that is what is going to lead you down the road to success. You don't need to be forcing yourself to exercise in a way that you do not enjoy. Find a way to move your body, whatever the hell that is. And honestly, find different ways to do it throughout the day. Like me and the kids, oh my goodness. I don't know what other people's kids are doing, but in gym class, they have the most ridiculous videos that they have our kids do. It's like fight off the coronavirus by like eating healthy foods and punching away the cupcakes. I'm like, okay, this is absolutely ridiculous, but it's what they're doing for gym. It's funny. That is how we're moving our body for that part of the day, and that's fine. So find those ways. Pop on the dance party. For us, like just raising the vibration of music is really powerful here. So we do that. In terms of the nutrition piece, I also feel like we have to eat a certain way. It's a new year. We got to do keto. We got to cut out carbs. We got to do this. We got to do that. I don't think that is the answer. I think like, let's just approach nutrition in a way that you can totally find sustainability in. For me and a lot of the clients that I end up working with, it's like, if you can't see yourself eating this way for longer than a couple of months, it's not a strategy that's going to work. If you like chocolate, let's find healthier ways for you to enjoy chocolate. If you like certain things, we got to make sure they're worked in. Like me and Ashley, we love wine. Not giving up wine. I'm sorry, but it's just not. It's not a long-term sustainable thing. So it'll be January, and people will be like, "Let's do a dry month." Cool, do a dry month if that brings you joy. But if that's going to be more stressful for you and your household, don't do it. Think about what you can add to your day versus what you're going to pull out. Can you add in more water? Can you add in more vegetables? Can you add in more protein? What can you add to your life versus what you're going to pull, what you're going to end up pulling out from it? And I guess the other big piece that I would say in terms of like health is find a freaking community. Find people that get you, people that are like on the same struggle bus as you, that you can just connect with. Like, there's a lot of things for me that I'm just like, okay, yep, you do nutrition and you do exercise, but you let your kid eat Smarties on Friday mornings and you just don't give a fuck. And so it's that. And then when I tell my community of like the women that I work with or even friends, they're like, okay, I'm going to feed my kid whatever the hell they want on a Friday, and we are all going to be okay. We're all going to get through this week. But you need to have that community of like, nobody has it all together. The balls are falling. It's A-okay, but we're getting through another week. And I think if we have that well-rounded approach to the way in which we're trying to approach nutrition and exercise and mindfulness and mental health for the year, we're all going to be okay. Man, we were in the same rodeo last year, and I think we all were like, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to get through this. And we just wanted to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And like, now that we're settling into like the second course of action, I don't know how you feel about the kids going back to school on Monday, but like I'm a very optimistic person, but right now that it's like, I don't know, that we're this many days out and there hasn't been an official announcement. I feel like it's going to be like Friday, they drop a bomb of like, nope, they're not going back to school as per expected, right? So.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think that really draws on kind of, you mentioned three things, or you mentioned some things, and it brought up for me, forgiveness. So if I didn't follow my plan right to the T, I forgive that. I'm going to let that be. I'm going to honor that this was the day and it was still good, right? And not throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. Like, well, if I can't stick to all my protein goals, I might as well do nothing, right? So really forgiving that piece of, I need to be perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
And also another thing you mentioned was celebrating, right? So at the end of the week, we survived another week, and that's worth celebrating, right? So really kind of allowing things to release and with that forgiveness, but also finding, because I think so many of us, what didn't I do, right? You talked about adding things in, and that's really just putting the positive spin on things. So what did we do today? Instead of going, oh, well, we didn't get outside for our walk. Shit, sucks. Okay, whatever. What did we do? Oh, we cuddled and we read stories. That's great, right? Like, oh, I didn't get my run in today. That's okay, but we had a dance party, right? So really that celebration piece of like, what did we do? What was awesome? Because there's not enough of that in our daily lives the way that it maybe once was organically.
Totally.
And I think the last thing that you really mentioned, and I went, that's hope. So when we talk about, are the kids going back to school? Who knows? I don't think so, but I'm not letting that shake my hope. Right? So many of us were like, oh, so now, like, whereas last year, that light at the end of the tunnel is like, we had a whole lot of hope. And now I see many of us don't have that same hope because it's linked to COVID,
Mm-hmm.
right? So keeping that hope within you, keeping that little candle burning of hope about things that are good, instead of just totally giving it away with kind of what the next government announcement is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. And I mean, even just waiting, I think so often of this year, we've been waiting to like plan our lives for like this to clear, for this to go away, for this to evaporate. And then the vaccine happens and then we're all good to go again. Everybody's been in this like, we're just waiting, 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 waiting. And it's like, shit, man, like we don't know how long we're going to be waiting. So let's be real. Do you really want to waste another 6 months just waiting to get the vaccine? Just in the like lingering land of like, okay, then I'll start living. Once I have the vaccine again, then I'll start living my life again, right? And I think so many people are sitting in this place of like, okay, yeah, that's when everything's gonna be okay again. Man, it's not gonna be okay again. Life is forever changed in whatever weird capacity COVID has affected us. We're gonna have to settle into the new normal, whatever the hell that looks like. But like the vaccine isn't the light at the end of the tunnel that we're all like thinking is going to resolve all of the issues, right? Like I don't know. I think it has its lasting effect, but you still got to make the best of it.
For sure. And there's going to be people who refuse the vaccine, right? Like, and I think that's.
And people are still going to die of COVID.
I'll be one of those.
Right? So people are still going to die of COVID with the vaccine or without the vaccine.
And everything else that we
have to get on. Pardon?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I said COVID and all the other things that nobody's talking about, right? Like people are still dying of cancer. People are still dying of heart disease. People are still dying in car accidents.
Suicide, everything.
Yeah. So I think the most important part is, like you said, finding that new normal and starting to love it, being present and not waiting for all of this to end. Because regardless of whether it does or it doesn't, your life right now, your awesome, beautiful, fucking brilliant life is on hold if you're waiting.
Totally. And I mean, like, it's kind of like even how I know we've been circling back to the pillars pieces. It's like the pillars may be like affected, broken down, a little bit rough right now, but waiting 6 more months to like tackle all of that, pillars are either going to be lower or exactly where they are. So if anybody's like listening, being like, yo man, this resonated, I need to like take action now, I'm going to put our contact at the bottom of this post here. But honestly guys, like the biggest piece of advice both of us can give you is like, you either take action right now to put your life in the direction that you're hoping for, to start that transformation, to take that first step, or you sit on the sidelines and you think to yourself 6 months from now, oh shit, I should have called those girls at that point because now my shitstorm is like 4 times bigger and it's going to be that much harder, right? And I think that's a piece of it that we're trying to really hammer home is like, we might not be your girls or we may be your girls, but regardless, your pillars are either going to be in the same spot or deeper a few minutes from now. So
exactly. You nailed it, girl. That was bang on. Exactly. Took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we can end today's chat with like our little bit of excitement about what is coming down the pipeline. So me and Ange have been dancing with an awesome idea that we're super excited and pumped about. And that's really just being able to provide more value, more education, more information, and more support for all of you. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I just want to hear more, I want to like learn more from you guys, we are coming out with a podcast. We are hoping that it is going to be a weekly thing that we are able to produce, get out, and really provide you guys with the support that you need over the upcoming months and the upcoming years as you work through your transformation journey. So we have that announcement. We don't have an official, like, this is when we're launching date, but this exciting announcement, if it is something that you are excited about and you're like, oh my goodness, you need to let me know right when it comes out, just put a comment below. We'll make sure that we fire it off to you right when it's live so that you guys can subscribe, sign up, and make sure that you don't miss an episode. So thank you, Ashley. I freaking love you. I literally could talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours.
I know.
Oh, makes me so excited.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much. I am super excited to be linking our arms with Ange. I always think it's so funny the way that the universe puts the people you need most right in front of you. And for 8+ years, 8 years of being very, very close, and then, you know, a lifetime of school in front of that, it was like, she's knocking, and finally it's like, my pillars falling apart and your pillars falling apart has brought us together to this really beautiful, holistic, truly holistic take on life and health. And I'm really super excited about what lies ahead for all of our listeners, but also both of us.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, babe. I hope you have a lovely evening, and thank you for everybody that has watched, tuned into this video. We certainly appreciate your support, and we look forward to sharing more information with you guys in the future. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, sweetie.